everybody, welcome back to the next part in my dialing in of the global settings. And this time we're going to be talking in part 2 about the preferences menu in global settings. So I started this little series to kind of take everybody through every single global setting that we have available to us in the Helix. I think this is important because there's a lot of questions I get where folks are asking how things should be set or if they can do certain things. And by understanding all of these global settings, it can really put us in a position to be able to accomplish what we need, if at all possible, in these settings, just by knowing that it's actual possibility within the global settings. So without further ado, let's take a look at part 2, global settings preferences. So here we are over in our global settings under the preferences selection or menus. We'll see that we have 6 different settings on page 1. And if we page over, we have one more setting over there. So let's go through these one at a time. So the first thing that we have up is called Snapshot Edits. And the 2 choices are either recall or discard. Now, if I have this set on recall, let's go over to HX Edit and see how this works. First thing you'll notice over in HX Edit is I will toggle back and forth between discard and recall. And you'll notice right up here in our snapshot camera button, it turns red or goes back to the normal white or gray setting. So when we're on recall, what's going to happen is you'll see here that I have a little snapshot set up so that on snapshot 1, my channel 1 drive on this matchstick channel 1 amp is at 2.9, and on snapshot 2, it's 5.3. So if I come here and I make a change to this, and let's say move it to 4.5, go back to snapshot 1, we still have our 2.9. And what happens is it recalls the changes that I made. I didn't have to save those changes. They just recalled, as the Snapshot Edits global setting says. It's going to recall it. Now, if I go over here to my global settings and change this to discard, now what you're going to notice is the little camera icon up here turns red. Now, if I'm on Snapshot 2 and I switch this, let's say all the way up to 10, and I go back to Snapshot 1, I have my 2.9 setting that was there. But if I go back to Snapshot 2, it just reverts back to 4.5. So it didn't recall this setting of 10 I put on, it discarded it. So you might say, well, in this setting, how do I get it to keep the setting of 10 if I want to change it? Well, I would go to the setting of 10, I would come up here and I would say, save this. Now when I switch between those snapshots after saving, I get my setting of 10 recalled as I want. So that's what the Snapshot Edits discard or recall setting does. I usually leave mine on recall, but as with all of these global settings, this is going to really just be a personal preference. Next up is the tap tempo pitch. So this is going to determine how the delay repeats of any delay that we have in our preset, how they're going to behave while we're pressing the tap tempo. So accurate is going to respect the natural pitch fluctuations inherent when we actually change a real delay's pedal time knob, and transparent just minimizes those effects. And that's how these 2 settings sound. First up, we'll put it on authentic. Now we'll take a listen to it on transparent. Again, this is going to really be up to our own personal preference. Next up is preset numbering. Now, this is going to basically tell us how our presets are going to be numbered. If I have it set to the number and letter system, you'll notice when I go back to my home page here, I'm on preset 03A, as would be indicated by the naming we have it set to. Now, if I switch that over to numbers from 000 to 127, you'll now see that I'm on preset 008. Now, this could be very useful when we're trying to change presets via MIDI, and the triple digit setting might be much more convenient when trying to assign program change messages. So back over here in the global settings, the next selection is Snapshot Reselect. This could be a really useful function. I could either have this set to reload or toggle previous. Now, this is pretty interesting. What I'm going to show you in HX Edit, I'm going to just hit the Snapshot 2 button. So if I have this set to reload, all that happens if we look up on HX Edit by the snapshots here, I'm going to press snapshot 1 on my Helix. And as we would expect, it goes to snapshot 1. If I press snapshot 2, it goes to snapshot 2. If I press snapshot 2 again, it just recalls that same snapshot. But if I set this global setting to toggle previous, if I go to snapshot 8, let's say, and then back to snapshot 2. Now when I hit snapshot 2 button again, it's going to toggle back and forth from the previous snapshot I was on, which in this case was snapshot 8. That can be very useful if we just have to make quick snapshot changes between two snapshots and we don't want to be bouncing our foot around. We can just stay on the same switch and move that back and forth. So that's a very handy little feature that is built in that a lot of folks may not have been aware of. Next up is the joystick encoder. And our choices here are either selection or model. So what this is telling us, if I'm on model and I come back to a preset here and I want to use my little joystick, which is just off screen right over here, if I rotate this, what it does is it changes the amp model or the effect block that I'm on. You can kind of see I'm on amp and cab. So as I rotate through this, it's changing which amp model I'm using. Now, if we go back to our global settings and I put this on selection and come back to my home page, now when I rotate this knob, you'll notice that I can rotate the knob to select which block I'm going to edit. So it no longer changes the actual model that I'm using for that particular block we're on, but now it allows me to select that particular block. I can also press this while turning the joystick, and that's going to allow me to select the model that I would like. So if you notice, I let go, not that you can see me doing this, and I can choose my block. Once I'm at the block I want to edit, I press and turn, and then I can change the actual model. So very handy shortcuts that we can have that are very useful. Back to our global settings, we have the preset spillover, which can either be off or on. Now, what you're going to notice when we do this, and I'm going to be back up on HX Edit. Right now, this is turned off, and if I turned this on, it asks me if I actually want to do this, because this is going to remove path 2 to enable preset spillover. So I hit OK, and you'll notice over on HX Edit, I lost a whole path. So I've lost basically half of my processing power of my Helix. So by running on just this single path, this frees up CPU to allow us to use seamless switching with absolute minimal gaps when switching between presets and seamless delay and reverb spillover when switching not just between snapshots, but between full presets. So if we have no need for anything more than, let's say, the 8 blocks that are on one path and just the amount of CPU processing power on one path, we can have it set with the preset spillover turned on, and then we can seamlessly switch between presets. So that's a feature that may be very useful for some and may be useless for others who need to have a preset with the full CPU processing ability of the Helix at all times. So again, it's going to be up to our own personal preference to decide whether this is something that's going to be useful for us. And finally, when I page over, I have the final preferences global setting, which is auto impedance. Now, this is something that was added, I believe, as of 3.0, and it's something that was asked for a lot. The Helix had a bit of a strange thing that went on that a lot of folks complained about in the past before this firmware, and that was when it was set to auto impedance on our input block, that it would automatically adopt the impedance of whatever block was first. Now, that would undoubtedly affect the tone of our entire preset, whether that particular effect was turned on or off. So how this works now, we can either choose first block or first enabled. So if we have it set at first block, then the auto impedance is going to be determined by the first block we have in the path, whether it is turned on or whether it is in bypass. We can also set this to first enabled so that if we had, say, something like a fuzz pedal first in our path and we had auto impedance set to on in our input block and we wanted that impedance set to what the fuzz was supposed to be set to when it was enabled, but when we turn it off, we go back to the impedance of the next active block, then that is going to be something that's going to be very useful for some folks. So they can get more of the authentic sound of, let's say, the impedance of that fuzz pedal when it's engaged, but when we turn it off, it's just no longer in the path. And that is not what is determining the impedance any longer. All right, so what did you guys think? I hope that was helpful, and I hope I explained things clearly. This information is also in the manual. You can go read that, and I would encourage folks to do that. Go back and review it if there was something that you didn't understand. There's a lot of powerful tools in the Helix that maybe some folks aren't aware of simply by changing a global setting and having it work the way we would prefer for our workflow or our purposes. So the first step in that is just being aware that they're there, and we can save ourselves a lot of time if it is a particular function that we want available to us. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed that. Please like the video, share it with anybody who you think would get some use out of watching it. Also, please subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell notification to get notified when I put new content out. I will be back really soon with some more. Thank you guys again so much for tuning in. Ciao for now.